Charlie had been working at the auto repair shop for as long as anyone could remember. The familiar creak of the shop's front door, the scent of motor oil in the air, and the steady hum of machinery had been a part of his life for over 3 decades. When he first started, he was just a young mechanic, eager to learn and grow. The shop was small, tucked away in a quiet corner of the town, but it had its loyal customers. Back then, Charlie didn't know that one day he would become the heart and soul of the place, the one everyone turned to when a problem seemed too big to handle. At the beginning, it was just him and the owner, Jim. Jim was a no-nonsense kind of guy, a little rough around the edges but with a heart of gold. They had an unspoken bond, one built on mutual respect and the understanding that the shop's success depended on both of them working together. As the years went by, Charlie became the backbone of the business. He knew how to fix just about anything with an engine. Whether it was a family car that needed a simple tune-up or a commercial truck with a major issue, Charlie had the skill and patience to get it running again. The customers trusted him. They knew that if Charlie was working on their car, it would be in good hands. He was reliable, honest, and always willing to go the extra mile. Over time, the shop grew. Jim brought in more mechanics, trying to keep up with the increasing demand. But Charlie, despite being one of the longest-standing members of the team, never let his head get too big. He stayed humble, always focusing on his work, always making sure things were done right. But as much as the shop grew, so did its problems. Business wasn't what it used to be. The economy had taken a downturn, and fewer people were willing to spend money on repairs when they could barely afford to pay for basic needs. Jim, struggling to keep the shop afloat, began cutting corners. He couldn't afford to pay the bills, let alone raise wages. The mechanics, who had once worked together as a tight-knit family, began to feel the pressure. Tension started to build between Jim and his employees. Charlie, though he had seen the writing on the wall, never expected it to go as far as it did. One afternoon, Jim called Charlie into his office. It was just the two of them sitting across from each other. Charlie could feel the weight in the air, a sense of finality. Jim, looking worn and tired, sighed deeply before he spoke. "Charlie," he began, his voice barely above a whisper, "I need to let you go." Charlie blinked, not quite understanding what he was hearing. It felt like the ground had shifted beneath him. He had been a part of this place for so long. His tools, his hands, his sweat, and his heart had been invested in every bolt and engine. To hear Jim say those words was like a punch in the gut. He had been prepared for a lot of things, but this wasn't one of them. "You've been here for a long time," Jim continued, his voice shaking slightly. "But the shop is struggling. I'm not making enough to keep up with everything, and I have to make cuts. I wish things were different, but right now, this is the only way." Charlie felt the silence hang between them. The shop, the work, the people. He had devoted his life to this place. To be told he wasn't needed anymore felt like a betrayal, even though he knew Jim wasn't the villain in the story. Jim was just trying to survive, just like everyone else. But Charlie couldn't shake the feeling of being discarded, as though everything he had done didn't matter. He didn't argue. He didn't beg. That wasn't Charlie's way. Instead, he stood up, grabbed his tool bag, and gave Jim a solemn nod. "I understand," he said quietly. "I'll gather my things." As he walked out of the office, the other mechanics were working, oblivious to what had just transpired. Charlie didn't say goodbye to anyone. He didn't feel like there was anything to say. The young guys who had looked up to him, who had learned from him over the years, continued to work as though nothing had changed. But Charlie knew better. Everything had changed. The shop didn't feel like home anymore. It didn't feel like the place where he had spent the majority of his life, where he had put his heart and soul into every repair. The walls, once full of the sounds of laughter and camaraderie, now seemed hollow. Charlie had given so much to this shop, and now he was walking away with nothing but a toolbox and the bitter taste of betrayal. The ride home was quiet. Charlie didn't turn on the radio. He couldn't bring himself to. Instead, he stared out the window, lost in his thoughts. The streetlights blurred into streaks of light as he drove, but his mind wasn't on the road. It was on the shop, on the life he had built there, on the relationships he had forged and the memories he had made. Was it all for nothing? Did it mean anything at all? When he got home, Charlie walked into his small house, the same house he had lived in for years. The familiar smell of coffee and the old couch in the living room did little to comfort him. It felt empty, like a place he used to know but didn't quite belong to anymore. His wife Linda was in the kitchen, humming as she prepared dinner. When she saw him, she stopped, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "You're home early," she said, her eyes scanning his face for any hint of an explanation. Charlie had never been one to show his emotions, but Linda could always tell when something was wrong. She had seen it in his eyes when he came home after long, hard days at the shop, but this was different. This was something deeper. Charlie didn't say anything for a moment. Then slowly he spoke. "I've been let go," he said, the words heavy in the air between them. Linda froze. "What?" she whispered, her face going pale. "How? Why?" "I don't know," Charlie replied, his voice thick with emotion. "The shop's not doing well. Jim had to make cuts. He said he didn't have a choice." Linda took a step toward him, her face full of concern. "Charlie, I'm so sorry. I know how much that shop meant to you." Charlie nodded but didn't respond. He didn't need to. She knew, they both knew. The shop had been more than just a job to him. It had been his life. And now it was gone. In the days that followed, Charlie tried to keep himself busy. He worked on his car in the garage, fixing small problems here and there, but nothing felt the same. It was as though the spark had gone out of him. He wasn't just a mechanic anymore. He was a man without a purpose. He spent hours walking around town trying to clear his head, but everywhere he went he saw reminders of his old life. The familiar faces of customers who used to trust him with their cars, the places he used to frequent, all of it just felt different. He didn't belong in that world anymore. As the days passed, Charlie's frustration grew. He had been good at what he did, no one could deny that. But now, without the shop, what was he supposed to do? What was his next step? He didn't have the answers. All he had was a toolbox and the quiet voice in his head telling him that he wasn't done yet. The days following Charlie's departure from the shop were difficult. He had spent so many years at the auto repair shop dedicating himself to the work, and now he found himself with nothing. His days were filled with the silence of his house, the same house where his family had gathered for years, sharing laughter and small moments. Now it felt empty. The hum of the garage was missing, and the steady rhythm of turning wrenches and fixing cars had been replaced by a quiet void. Linda noticed the change. At first, Charlie tried to hide it. He would get up early, as he always had, and pretend to go about his day. He tinkered with his car in the garage, fixing things that didn't really need fixing just to fill the time, but Linda could see through it. She knew her husband, and she knew that the man who came home from the shop every night was not the same one who was walking around their house now. "Charlie, you can't keep doing this," she said one evening as he worked on a car part that didn't need any repairs. He hadn't spoken much all day, and the quiet had become almost unbearable. "You need to talk to someone." Charlie didn't want to talk. Talking meant facing the reality of his situation, and he wasn't ready for that yet. Instead, he just nodded and kept working, though his thoughts were elsewhere. What was he supposed to do now? He had spent 30 years doing one thing, and now that was gone. Every day felt like he was stuck in the same loop, a never-ending cycle of uncertainty and frustration. Linda didn't push him, but she could see that he was struggling. She knew how much the shop had meant to him. It wasn't just about fixing cars. It was about the pride, the sense of accomplishment, and the community he had built over the years. He had been more than just a mechanic. He had been a mentor to the younger guys at the shop, a guide who had shown them the ropes. He had helped them grow, and in turn, they had respected him. But now that world was gone, and Linda could see that Charlie was lost. In the weeks that followed, Charlie found himself unable to escape the thoughts that plagued him. He didn't want to admit it, but he had started to feel angry. Angry at Jim, angry at the situation, and most of all, angry at himself. He had worked so hard, given so much, and yet it wasn't enough. He had built his life around the shop, and now it felt like everything had crumbled. The people he had trusted, the place he had called home, all of it was slipping away, and there was nothing he could do about it. One day, as Charlie sat on the front porch, staring out at the street, his phone buzzed. He picked it up, half expecting it to be a "Charlie, I need to talk to you." Jim's voice came through the phone, sounding strained. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and I realize I made a mistake. The shop hasn't been the same without you. I should have never let you go." Charlie felt a mix of emotions rush through him. Part of him wanted to be angry, to yell at Jim for what he had done. But another part of him that he didn't quite understand, felt a sense of relief. Jim had admitted that he was wrong, that the shop had missed him. It was a small victory, but it was something. "I'm sorry, Charlie," Jim continued. "I've been trying to keep the place afloat, but without you it's been a struggle. The guys don't have the same energy without you around. I've been talking to the investors, and we need someone who knows the business inside and out." "Someone like you?" Charlie was silent for a moment, his mind racing. What did Jim want from him? Was this an offer to come back to the shop? Would it be the same as before? Or would it just be another temporary fix for a broken business? "I don't know, Jim," Charlie replied slowly. "You fired me. You let me go like I didn't matter. I can't just forget that." "I know," Jim said quietly, "and I don't expect you to forgive me overnight. But I want to make things right. I want to bring you back, not just as a mechanic but as a partner. I need someone who understands the business, who can help me turn things around. You've got the skills, Charlie. You know this place inside and out. I need you." Charlie didn't answer right away. He was torn. The idea of going back to the shop, of being a part of something again, was tempting. But could he trust Jim? Could he really go back to the place where he had been let go so suddenly? The emotions that had flooded him when he first left the shop still lingered. The sting of betrayal, the feeling of being replaced, those weren't things that could just be swept away. "I'll think about it," Charlie finally said, his voice heavy with uncertainty. Jim let out a sigh of relief. "I understand. Just know that the offer stands. Whenever you're ready." The call ended and Charlie sat there for a long time staring at the phone in his hand. What was he supposed to do? He could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him. On one hand, he wanted to walk away from the shop forever, to never set foot in that place again. But on the other hand, he couldn't shake the feeling that he still had something to give, something that could make a difference. In the days that followed, Charlie spent his time thinking about the offer. He talked to Linda about it, trying to figure out what he should do. She listened patiently, never pushing him one way or the other. She knew how hard this was for him. "Charlie, you've given so much to that place," she said one night as they sat at the kitchen table. "If you go back, it has to be because you want to, not because you feel like you have to. You've already built a life for yourself. You don't owe anyone anything." Charlie nodded, but the truth was he didn't know what he wanted anymore. He had always defined himself by his work, by the shop, by his role as the go-to guy for repairs. Now he wasn't sure who he was without that. As the days turned into weeks, Charlie began to realize something. He didn't have to make the decision right away. He didn't have to rush into anything. Maybe it wasn't about going back to the shop. It was about figuring out what he wanted for himself, about taking control of his life again. And maybe, just maybe, Jim's offer wasn't just about fixing the shop. Maybe it was about something more. Maybe it was a chance for Charlie to rebuild not just the business, but his own sense of purpose. After all, he had spent 30 years there. The shop wasn't just a place. It was part of who he was. Charlie didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time since he left, he felt a glimmer of hope. Charlie had been thinking about Jim's offer for weeks. The idea of returning to the shop, the place that had been such a huge part of his life, was both appealing and unsettling. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing on him, and the longer he thought about it, the more he realized how much he missed it. The rhythm of the work, the sound of tools clanging, the satisfaction of a job well done, it was all part of him. But it wasn't just the work. It was the people, the connections he had made, the sense of purpose that came from being part of something bigger. One crisp morning, after a restless night of tossing and turning, Charlie finally made a decision. He had spent enough time doubting himself and replaying the past. It was time to take control of his future. He couldn't let the fear of failure or the bitterness of the past hold him back any longer. He picked up the phone, dialed Jim's number, and waited as the phone rang. "Charlie?" Jim's voice came through, sounding surprised but hopeful. "I didn't think I'd hear from you so soon." "I've made my decision," Charlie said, his voice steady, though he still felt a knot in his stomach. "I'm coming back." There was a pause on the other end. Charlie could almost hear Jim exhaling in relief. "You mean it? You're really coming back?" Jim asked, his voice filled with gratitude. "Yeah," Charlie replied, "but things have to be different. I'm not just coming back to fix cars. I want to help you turn this place around. I want to be more than just a mechanic. I want to be part of the team that rebuilds this shop." Jim didn't hesitate. "I wouldn't have it any other way. You've always had a vision for this place, Charlie, I just didn't see it before. But now I'm ready to listen." Charlie hung up the phone, a feeling of determination rising within him. He didn't know exactly how they would rebuild the shop, but he knew one thing for sure. It was going to take more than just fixing cars. It was going to take a complete overhaul, not just of the business, but of the culture, the atmosphere, the way they treated each other and the customers. If they were going to succeed, they had to work together as a team, something that had been lost in the months before Charlie left. When Charlie arrived at the shop the next morning, the familiar sights and sounds greeted him. The scent of motor oil, the clanging of tools, the chatter of the mechanics, it all felt like coming home. But things were different now. The shop was quieter, more subdued. The energy that had once filled the space felt drained, as though the shop was waiting for something to happen. The young mechanics looked up as Charlie entered, and their faces were a mix of surprise and curiosity. They had heard he was coming back, but seeing him walk through the door was something else. Charlie wasn't sure what to expect from them. When he left, they had been just starting to find their rhythm, but now they were all part of the team that had to keep the shop running, despite the challenges. Charlie walked up to Jim, who was standing near the front counter. Jim greeted him with a handshake, his face breaking into a smile. "Welcome back," he said, the relief evident in his voice. "I'm here to help," Charlie said, his tone serious. "But we need to make some changes, Jim. We can't keep doing things the way we've been doing them. We need to create a new plan, one that gets everyone involved and sets the shop up for success." Jim nodded. "I agree. What do you have in mind?" Charlie looked around the shop, his eyes scanning the workstations, the tools hanging on the walls, the clutter that had accumulated over the past few months. He knew this place like the back of his hand, but even he could see that it had been neglected. It wasn't just about fixing cars anymore, it was about fixing the entire operation. "I want to start with the basics," Charlie said. "We need to streamline how we operate. We can't keep taking on too much work without focusing on quality. If we want to attract more customers, we need to make sure we're doing the job right every time." Jim agreed. "That's what we've been missing, attention to detail. We've been so focused on getting as many cars in as we can that we've lost sight of what makes us different." Charlie continued. "We also need to improve our communication with the customers. They're the ones who keep this place running, and we've got to show them that we value their business. We need to be more transparent about what's going on with their cars, give them honest assessments, and explain the work we're doing. No more rushing them through without a second thought." Jim nodded again, looking more hopeful than Charlie had seen him in months. "You're right. We've been taking customers for granted, assuming they'll keep coming back, but it's not that simple anymore." Charlie glanced over at the young mechanics who were still watching the conversation. He could see that they were listening, but they hadn't yet bought into the idea that things needed to change. "We're all in this together," Charlie said, turning to face them. "If we're going to make this shop work, it's going to take everyone working as a team. That means no more cutting corners, no more rushing through jobs just to get to the next one. It means showing up every day, giving our best, and supporting each other. We're a team, and if we don't act like one, this place won't survive." There was a moment of silence before one of the younger mechanics spoke up. "You really think we can turn this place around?" he asked, his voice uncertain but eager. "It's been tough lately," Charlie smiled. "I do, but it's going to take all of us. If we can get everyone on board, if we can trust each other and hold ourselves accountable, we can make this work." One by one, the other mechanics nodded, their faces softening as they began to belie. His heart skipped a beat. It was Jim, the last person he had expected to hear from. After all, Jim had fired him. Charlie didn't know what to expect from the call, but he felt a surge of curiosity. He hesitated for a moment, then answered, V in the idea of change. They had been feeling the weight of the shop's struggles too, and now, with Charlie back, there was a renewed sense of hope. For the rest of the morning, Charlie worked alongside the team, helping them tackle the repairs that had piled up. As he worked, he noticed something. There was a difference in the way they approached the work now. They were taking their time, double-checking their work and communicating with each other. It wasn't perfect yet, but it was a start. As the day went on, Charlie sat down with Jim to discuss the next steps. They talked about what they could do to attract more customers, how they could market the shop and improve their reputation. Charlie had a lot of ideas, but he knew it wasn't just about the work they did. It was about the experience they offered to every customer who walked through the door. By the end of the day, there was a palpable shift in the atmosphere. The shop felt more alive, more energetic. It wasn't just about getting the job done. It was about doing it well with pride. Charlie knew that they had a long road ahead, but for the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful about the future. As he left the shop that evening, Charlie couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. He had taken the first step toward rebuilding not just the business, but the team, the spirit and the pride that had been missing for so long. There was still a lot of work to be done, but for the first time since he left, Charlie felt like he was back where he belonged. And this time, things were going to be different. The first few weeks after Charlie returned to the shop were both challenging and rewarding. The atmosphere had definitely changed. There was a newfound sense of purpose in the air, a shift that everyone could feel. The mechanics, who had once been hesitant to buy into the idea of change, were starting to come around. They were working with more care, taking pride in their work and communicating with each other more effectively. But the road ahead was still long, and Charlie knew it wasn't going to be easy. One morning, as the shop opened its doors to a busy day, Charlie stood at the front of the shop, watching as cars pulled in. The once quiet space was now bustling with activity. Mechanics moved quickly between vehicles, their focus sharp, their tools at the ready. The atmosphere was lively but controlled, with each person knowing their role. Charlie could see it now. The shop had potential, real potential, to turn things around. Still, there was a nagging feeling in the back of his mind. As much progress as they had made, the business wasn't out of the woods yet. It was still struggling. Customers were coming in, but not as many as they needed. They had made improvements, but they still had to find a way to keep the momentum going. Charlie knew that the key to long-term success was not just about fixing cars. It was about building relationships with customers, making sure they trusted the shop enough to keep coming back. One afternoon, Charlie and Jim sat down in the small office, surrounded by papers and receipts. They had just finished another round of discussions with their investors, trying to figure out how to raise the funds they needed to upgrade the shop. The equipment was outdated, and there were repairs that needed to be made to the building itself. But money was tight. They had to be strategic. "It's not going to be easy," Jim said, rubbing his temples. "We've made a lot of changes, but we still need to get more people in here. We need to get the word out, and we need to do it quickly." Charlie leaned back in his chair, thinking, "I know, but it's not just about the repairs anymore, Jim. We've got to create an experience. People need to know that when they bring their car here, they're getting more than just a mechanic. They're getting a team that cares." Jim looked at Charlie, his expression thoughtful. "I know what you mean. But how do we do that? How do we make ourselves stand out in a town full of auto repair shops?" Charlie paused. He had been thinking about this for a while. "We've got to focus on what makes us different. We've got a lot of experience, we've got skilled mechanics, and we've got a personal touch that no one else can offer. Let's make that the center of our message. Let's build a brand around trust, quality, and customer care." Jim nodded slowly. "I see what you're saying. We've been so focused on getting cars in and out that we've forgotten what really matters, the people who walk through that door." Charlie's heart lifted. Jim was starting to get it. Exactly. We've got to show the customers that we care about their cars and their needs. We've got to show them that they can trust us to do the right thing, every time. They spent the next few days brainstorming ways to improve their customer experience. They talked about offering free consultations, where customers could bring in their cars for a quick assessment without any obligation. They discussed creating loyalty programs to reward repeat customers and offering discounts for referrals. They even talked about revamping the waiting area, making it more comfortable for customers who had to wait for their cars to be repaired. One of the ideas that really resonated with both of them was the concept of creating a community event. Charlie suggested they host a customer appreciation day, where they could invite the people who had supported them over the years and offer free car checkups, refreshments, and discounts on services. It was a way to show the community that they weren't just a business, they were part of the community. With these ideas in place, Charlie and Jim began putting a plan into motion. They created flyers, posted on social media, and even reached out to local businesses to spread the word about their upcoming event. The response was better than they expected. People were excited. They wanted to support a local business that cared about them, and they were eager to show their appreciation. The day of the event arrived, and the shop was buzzing with activity. The parking lot was filled with cars, and the front door was constantly opening as customers came and went. Inside, the mechanics were working quickly, offering free consultations, checking up on cars, and giving out free advice. The waiting area had been transformed. Comfy chairs, coffee, snacks, and a TV to make the customers feel at home. There was even a small kids' corner to keep young ones entertained while their parents waited. Charlie couldn't help but smile as he walked through the shop, talking to customers and making sure everything was running smoothly. This was what he had always wanted, a place where customers didn't just come for repairs but where they felt valued. The shop wasn't just about fixing cars anymore. It was about creating relationships, one customer at a time. By the end of the day, they had more customers than they had expected, and the response was overwhelmingly positive. People were excited about the changes they saw, and they were eager to come back. It wasn't just about the discounts, it was about the sense of community that Charlie and Jim had built. The shop had become a place where people felt like they mattered. But as successful as the event was, Charlie knew they couldn't rely on one day to keep the business afloat. They had to keep this momentum going. They needed to keep building relationships with their customers, keep offering quality service, and keep making improvements. It wasn't going to happen overnight, but Charlie felt more confident than ever that they were on the right track. The weeks following the event were filled with steady progress. More customers were returning, and the shop's reputation was slowly improving. They continued to offer loyalty programs and special promotions, and Charlie made it a point to personally follow up with customers after their service to make sure they were satisfied. Word of mouth began to spread, and the shop started to see a steady increase in business. But with success came new challenges. As the business grew, they needed to hire more staff, and Jim found himself stretched thin trying to manage the day-to-day operations. Charlie took on more responsibility, helping to oversee the hiring process and training new mechanics to fit in with the team. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. One day, as Charlie was working on a car, one of the new mechanics came up to him. "Hey, Charlie, can I ask you something?" the young man said, looking a little hesitant. "Sure," Charlie replied, wiping his hands on a rag. "What's on your mind?" "I just wanted to say..." "Thanks," the mechanic said, a sheepish smile on his face. "You've really shown me how important it is to take my time with the work. I used to rush through things, but now I understand that quality is what matters most. I've learned so much from you." Charlie felt a surge of pride. This was what he had hoped for. Not just better business, but a stronger team, one that cared about doing things right. "You're welcome," Charlie said, smiling. "It's all about doing the best job you can every single time. That's how you build trust with the customers." As the months passed, the shop's reputation continued to improve, and Charlie felt more and more at home. The mechanics had become a real team, and Jim had become a more confident leader. But it wasn't just the shop that had changed, it was Charlie too. He had rediscovered his purpose, not just as a mechanic, but as someone who could help build something meaningful. The road ahead was still full of challenges, but Charlie knew that they were ready for whatever came next. They had a plan, a team, and a community that was behind them, and for the first time in a long while, Charlie felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. As the months passed, Charlie began to feel a sense of pride he hadn't experienced in years. The shop was no longer the place it had been when he first left. It had transformed into something better, something more than just a business. It had become a community hub, a place where people came not only for car repairs but for trust and a personal touch. Every day the shop was busy, the phones were ringing, and the parking lot was filled with cars. The transformation was evident, but there was still so much work to do. Charlie had never been one to sit back and relax. Even as the shop continued to grow, he kept pushing forward, constantly looking for ways to improve. There were always new ideas to consider, new strategies to implement, and new challenges to face. But for the first time in a long while, he felt confident about the direction they were heading in. One morning, Charlie arrived at the shop early, as usual. The sun had barely risen and the streets were still quiet. He enjoyed these early hours when it felt like the world was still waking up, and he could focus without distractions. The shop had already started to hum with activity as the other mechanics arrived, ready for another busy day. Charlie could hear the sound of tools being organized and engines starting up. It was a good feeling, the sound of people working together toward the same goal. Jim walked over to him, a broad smile on his face. "Charlie, I think we're really turning a corner here. We've got more customers coming in than we've ever had, and the feedback has been incredible." "People are noticing the difference," Charlie nodded, his eyes scanning the shop. He had been working side by side with Jim, helping to train the new mechanics, setting standards for the shop and ensuring that every job was done right. The shop wasn't perfect yet, but it was a lot closer than it had been just a few months ago. The team had come together and the energy in the shop was palpable. "We've still got a long way to go," Charlie said, his voice steady, "but we're on the right path. We just have to keep pushing," Jim agreed. "I don't know what I would have done without you, Charlie. I honestly didn't think we could turn things around, but you've proven me wrong. This place is buzzing now. We've got customers waiting for appointments and we're getting more referrals than ever." Charlie smiled, but it was a humble smile. "We're doing this together, Jim. It's not just me. It's the whole team." As the day went on, Charlie moved from car to car, checking in on each mechanic, offering guidance and making sure everything was running smoothly. The mechanics were no longer just employees. They were part of a team, a family of sorts. And Charlie was proud of what they had built. He had always been the one to teach the younger mechanics, to show them the ropes, but now he saw something different. The new guys were teaching each other, helping each other improve. It was a beautiful thing to witness. At lunch, Charlie took a break and sat outside on the shop's front steps, watching the cars go by. He was still processing everything that had happened since he had come back. There had been so much change, so many challenges, but it had all been worth it. He had put in the work and now he was seeing the results. As he sat there, lost in thought, a car pulled into the lot. It was an older sedan, the kind that had seen better days. Charlie's eyes narrowed slightly as he recognized the car. It was one of the regulars. The owner was an elderly woman who had been bringing her car to the shop for years. She had always been kind to Charlie, and he had developed a sort of soft spot for her. She had always treated him like family, and he had always done his best to take care of her car. The woman got out of the car slowly, her movements stiff with age. She waved at Charlie and he waved back, a warm smile on his face. "Hello, Mrs. Peterson," Charlie called out, walking over to her. "Charlie, my dear, it's so good to see you," she said, her voice full of warmth. "How's everything going here? I've heard so many good things about the shop lately. You've really turned things around, haven't you?" Charlie nodded. "It's getting there, Mrs. Peterson. It's been a lot of work, but we're doing okay. How's your car running?" "Oh, it's been making this funny noise lately," she said, her brows furrowing in concern. "I've been meaning to come in for a while, but you know how it is. Time just gets away from me." Charlie smiled gently. "Don't worry about it. We'll take a look and get it all fixed up for you." As he walked with her into the shop, Charlie couldn't help but feel grateful. It was moments like these that reminded him why he had come back in the first place. It wasn't just about fixing cars. It was about making a difference in people's lives. Mrs. Peterson had been coming to the shop for years, and now, because of the changes they had made, the shop was in a position to continue helping her and so many others. Later that afternoon, as the shop started to wind down, Charlie sat in the office with Jim, going over the books and planning for the future. They had made some good progress, but there was always more to do. They were talking about expanding the shop, maybe even hiring more mechanics to keep up with the growing demand. "We've got a good thing going here," Jim said, leaning back in his chair. "I can't believe how far we've come in such a short time. We're not out of the woods yet, but we're definitely heading in the right direction." Charlie nodded. "Yeah, but we can't stop now. We've got to keep growing, keep improving. If we want to stay ahead, we've got to keep innovating. We can't just rely on what's working now. We've got to keep pushing ourselves." Jim looked at Charlie, a thoughtful expression on his face. "You've really helped me see things differently. I used to think that all we needed was more customers, more business. But it's about more than that, isn't it? It's about the people. It's about the relationships we build with our customers and the way we treat each other as a team." Charlie smiled. "Exactly. The business will follow if we focus on the right things. If we take care of the customers and each other, the rest will fall into place." As the days turned into weeks, Charlie continued to focus on the bigger picture. He worked with Jim and the team to fine-tune their approach, always looking for ways to improve and innovate. The shop continued to grow and their reputation continued to spread. More and more people came to them, not just because they needed car repairs, but because they trusted them. It wasn't easy. There were still challenges, still moments of doubt, but with each challenge, Charlie felt more confident. He had found his purpose again. It wasn't about the shop's success, though that was important. It was about the people, the team he had helped build, the customers he had helped serve. The connections, the trust, the relationships, that was what made all the difference. In the end, Charlie realized that the shop wasn't just a place to fix cars. It was a place where people came together. It was a place where the work mattered, but so did the people. And as long as they kept that at the heart of everything they did, there was no limit to what they could achieve. Looking around the shop, Charlie knew that they were just getting started. The road ahead was still full of challenges, but he was no longer afraid. He had a team behind him, a community supporting him, and a purpose that kept him moving forward. For the first time in a long while, Charlie felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. And the future, whatever it held, was something he was ready to face, head on. As the months passed, the shop's reputation continued to improve, and Charlie felt more and more at home. The mechanics had become a real team, and Jim had become a more confident leader. But it wasn't just the shop that had changed, it was Charlie too. He had rediscovered his purpose not just as a mechanic, but as someone who could help build something meaningful. The road ahead was still full of challenges, but Charlie knew that they were ready for whatever came next. They had a plan, a team, and a community that was behind them, and for the first time in a long while, Charlie felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. As the months passed, Charlie began to feel a sense of pride he hadn't experienced in years. The shop was no longer the place it had been when he first left. It had transformed into something better, something more than just a business. It had become a community hub, a place where people came not only for car repairs but for trust and a personal touch. Every day the shop was busy, the phones were ringing, and the parking lot was filled with cars. The transformation was evident, but there was still so much work to do. Charlie had never been one to sit back and relax. Even as the shop continued to grow, he kept pushing forward, constantly looking for ways to improve. There were always new ideas to consider, new strategies to implement, and new challenges to face. But for the first time in a long while, he felt confident about the direction they were heading in. One morning, Charlie arrived at the shop early, as usual. The sun had barely risen and the streets were still quiet.